broke. We're all wounded. And I certainly don't want to glorify my sins, just retelling it to show you the depth of what, a soul can get into and how God can come in and just transform a life and continue to transform it. I mean, I'm not done. I'm not done yet. I'm a work in progress, but something tremendous happened in my life. And if you, wherever you're at in your faith journey, or if you have someone in your life that you're praying for, a family member, a friend who's super lost, I want to give you some hope, because if God can do what he did for me, man, there's a ton of hope for everybody. So, all right. So I'm 48 years old right now. So that means I was born in 1972. So I'm getting to be an old geezer. But when I was born, my family was not religious at all. They didn't believe in God. They didn't talk about God. They never prayed. We certainly never went to church or anything. Therefore, I wasn't baptized or anything like that. It wasn't part of our life. And my mom was a very beautiful woman. And, she and my dad, they were very young. My mom had me. I was conceived when she was 17, born when she was 18. And so she was like a sister to me almost growing up. She taught me cool music to listen to, and all that, but nothing about religion whatsoever. And when I was just a little child, my parents divorced and my mom remarried. And my dad, my second dad, was worse than the first one, because my first dad was an alcoholic. He was a womanizer. He was cheating on my mom. And so it was a disaster. So they got a divorce. My mother remarried to a second man who didn't even have a job. And so my mother had to join the United States Navy, go off to boot camp in Florida, and leave me with my second dad in a trailer home in West Virginia in the United States. That's like hillbilly type stuff, right? If you're not familiar with that, it's like redneck, like these people are, like living in the woods. So this is what I was doing with my second dad. When my mom came back, she divorced him. And then we moved to Virginia Beach, Virginia, nice area. And that's where my love for surfing started. And then she remarried a third time, man. So by the time I was 9 years old, all this happened in 9 years, I had 3 dads. And none of these men were St. Joseph. Like I'm standing next to an image of St. Joseph I commissioned for one of my books. None of these men were like virtuous like St. Joseph. They were players, man. And my third father, he was a military officer. So, he was like, yes, sir. And I'm like, whatever, dude. And so we didn't get along. But he was a Christian. Now, not really. I'm only saying that because he had been baptized. He had gone to church when he was young, but he didn't go now. And he was an Episcopalian. That's what we call it in the United States. I think over in the UK, you call Anglican or whatever. So he was one of those on a piece of paper, but he adopted me. So I got his last name. So my last name is Calloway. That's not my biological father's last name. And I was glad I got adopted, man, because up until I got adopted, until I got the name Calloway, I have my father's last name, my biological father's last name, which is Croc. That sucks. So that's a horrible last name. So I was like, thank God for adoption, praise the Lord. So I get Calloway as a last name because I'd be Father Croc right now. It'd be horrible. So unless that's your last name, but it's beautiful, beautiful. So I become Calloway, and then his parents, my new grandparents, because I got grandparents all over the place with 3 dads, And so then his parents said, look, this boy hasn't been baptized. He's 10 years old, after they got married. And they said, you got to get him baptized. They were like, we're not going to get him baptized. So finally, grandparents, they nag and nag. And so they kept nagging. And so finally they were like, fine, shut up. So they went and they baptized me at an Episcopalian church in Virginia Beach because there was no preparation needed and you didn't have to do anything. So we just went. And all I remember, I was 10 years old. Some dude dressed funny, poured water over my face. And then we went outside and we ate donuts, that was church. Welcome to church. Welcome to Christianity, So I was like, whatever. And my parents didn't care. They just wanted the certificate to show the grandparents so they could shut up, right? It's like, stop nagging us. We got them baptized. Be happy, So we never prayed. We never went back to church and all that kind of stuff. Did I hear about Jesus? Of course. But Jesus was a fairy tale to me. He was like a cartoon character. He was like a ghost or something, and it wasn't real. And, I grew up watching TV constantly. So that Jesus stuff was as real to me as like Scooby-Doo or Tom and Jerry or Bugs Bunny. It was like, that junk ain't real. And every now and then I would see some guy on TV on a Saturday or a Sunday morning talking about Jesus. He was the preacher man, and he had a Bible, and he was like, glory, glory, in the name of Jesus, I'll be healed. And I was like, these people are nuts, man. These people actually think that there's some dude who walked on water and rose from the dead. This is insane. I mean, because, in the cartoons, you die a million times, but you always come back to life. So it was like, this stuff ain't real. These people are just hard up for money, and they can't get a real job. And so they're asking people, in the name of Jesus, to send them money, on the telephone line. So I was like, this is a joke. So I didn't want anything to do with religion, especially Christianity. Because when I got into my early teen years, or my preteen years, I started drinking, I started smoking weed, I started, looking at pornography, all that kind of stuff. And that whole religion stuff to me was absolute nonsense. It was like, it didn't make any sense to me. And the whole culture seemed to be against it, and said that all religion was basically stupid, but especially Christianity. Because Christianity, they said, and this is what all my teachers were teaching me in class, man, was Christianity is for unscientific morons who are stuck in the Middle Ages, who haven't updated with the times, and they're just a bunch of idiots, and they hate women, and they oppress people with their rules and regulations. So I was like, totally. I'm like, if you have to be religious, you should become like a Buddha or something, and just meditate. And I was like, but Christianity is like the most stupid of all religions, and so I wanted absolutely nothing to do with it. And so when I got, into my teen years, because I started doing drugs and stuff before I was even a teenager, like when I was 11. And then when I became a teenager, we moved, because remember, my third father was a military officer. So we moved to California, and that was a dream. It was awesome. It was like everything exciting, Hollywood, and, all the girls, everything was beautiful, all the music, all the TV shows. It was like incredible. And the beaches were better than on the East Coast of the United States. All the surfing was like next level. So I was just like, this is fantastic. But I was living like an animal, because in my classes, in my school, that's what they were telling us that we were. They were downgrading us, basically saying, look, you're not the center of the world. There's no God who created you. Science says that this has been here for a trillion years, and you're a speck of dust. You're not the center of anything. So don't think so great of yourself. You're going to become something else. And that made sense to me. I was like, yeah, like we were starfish or something at one point, and then we became monkeys. And now we're just like upright monkeys who, we don't smash a banana in our face, but we're civil now, and we can make a banana pie, but we still come from monkeys. And so that to me made Christianity even more stupid, because I thought, wow, what a bummer that God, this Jesus dude became one of us when we're moving on, homie. I mean, we were starfish, monkeys, now we're humans, but at some point we're going to be like some alien thing or something exploring the universe. So bummer, we're going to leave this whole Christianity in the dust of history. That was pretty lame that God became one of us when we're moving on, bro. So I hated Christianity even more, because it made zero sense to me, because this is how I was being taught. So, I'm doing the drugs, I'm drinking, I'm very immoral life, with my body. And then we moved to Japan. Now, I didn't want to go to Japan. I wanted to stay in California for the rest of my life. But we had to go to Japan because my stepdad, my dad got a new assignment. So we went over there. I immediately looked for the kids who were bad news. Today, everybody's politically correct. Nobody's, wants to call a spade a spade. Everybody's afraid, and everybody's triggered today. No matter what you say, somebody's offended. But when I grew up, everybody knew that if this dude was wearing like, rock and roll t-shirts, Motley Crue, Iron Maiden, had long hair and all that kind of stuff, he probably wasn't praying the rosary. I mean, he was probably smoking a joint and wanted to party, no brainer. But everybody today is like, oh, so, or if a girl was wearing basically dental floss for clothing, that girl had serious, what I mean? She was crying out for affirmation. It was obvious that girl is a player. All I got to tell her is she's beautiful. I got whatever I want. So that's where I gravitated to as soon as we moved to Japan. I stopped going to school, and I caused a scene, a huge scene. And we were supposed to be there for 3 years, but we only ended up being there for 2, because things got so bad that I ended up running away from home. And I mean, it was really bad. Like my hair was growing very long. You know, I got an earring. I was dressed like an alien. I dressed like a freak. And if you stood close enough to me, you would get high. You would get a contact high because I was constantly stoned. You know? So I was just like, this is great. I'm going to live in Japan for the rest of my life because it's an island. There's tons of waves to surf. You know, Asian women are beautiful. And I was just like, this is great. So what I didn't know though, and I was running with the Yakuza, by the way. So I was 15 years old at that point, running with the Japanese mafia. Now, they didn't fully initiate me in because they don't do that for Caucasian boys, but I was their drug mule. In my backpack, I would have like $10,000 in American currency. That's a lot of money in yen. And I would be taking it to different casinos for this, you know, criminal organization. And they were just throwing beautiful women at me. It was insane. But what I did not know during that whole time was that my mom, and by the way, my mom is almost 100% Italian. My mother's maiden name is Lucida Bianco. So how she wasn't a Catholic is just totally weird. But she had a crisis. She had a maternal breakdown. She went to a friend who was a Filipino woman. Now, I don't know how it is in Ireland or the UK or whatever, but I think it's probably safe to say that these Filipino women, man, are like so Catholic, it's ridiculous. Like they are like the special forces of God. They're like Green Berets in the spiritual life. So these Filipino women, God has put them all over the planet. And wherever Filipino women are, they're usually praying a novena or a rosary, or they're bringing the Catholic faith with them. So this Filipino woman said to my mother, and now I'm going to imitate Filipinos because I love Filipinos. I'm not doing it to make fun of them, but when they speak English, it's a little difficult. It's a little, you know, the P's, the W's, and the F's get a little messed up. So this Filipino woman said to my mother, I know what you got to do. So my mom is like, what do I got to do? You know, so this Filipino woman said, you got to talk to father. You got to talk to the Catholic priest. So my mom was like, what? Why are you telling me to talk to a Catholic priest? And this Filipino woman, she didn't quit. She said, he has the answer to your problem. Right. So my mom was like, fine, whatever. So my mom went and she talked to a military chaplain, a Catholic priest in Japan. And that priest changed my mom's life. He told my mom about hardcore in your face Catholicism. And it rocked her world. Like she was just like, I've never heard of this. She goes, I think some of my relatives in the past were Catholic because we came from, you know, central Italy, but I've never known any of this. So he was telling my mom about the Eucharist, where Jesus says, unless you eat my flesh and drink my blood, you don't have life. This was like a revelation to her about the Virgin Mary, about the Pope, about, you know, the saints, all this stuff. So she dragged my dad to church to listen to this priest, and they began the process of becoming Catholic. Now, I didn't know that because I ran away and I was gone for a long time. So I also did not know that my mom and my half brother, they had a son, my half brother, they moved back to the United States because they had to. The government said, you have to leave because your husband's going to stay, my stepdad, to look for your son because I was causing an international scene. So eventually I got apprehended. I got thrown in jail. I ran away. I actually escaped. They recaptured me. And then they threw me into the military holding cell called a brig. And then they kicked me out of the country of Japan. So I was handcuffed to the plane and handcuffed at my feet and escorted by two military police officers, big dudes. And we flew from Yokosuka, it's the major base there, to Honolulu. They put me on a commercial flight, like American Airlines. And then we flew to LAX, Los Angeles. And when we got to LAX, they took the handcuffs off and they released me into the custody of my father because I hadn't done anything criminal in Japan. It was a weird situation. They just wanted me out of their country. So I came back and I was about to run away because I'm like, sweet, got a free ride back to Cali. You know, thanks, suckers. But I didn't leave. I was like, okay, what do I do? And that's when they said, well, you're going to go back to the East Coast to see your mother and then you'll find out. So I was like, whatever. So we got on a plane and everybody's talking about me on the plane. They're like, oh, look at this. You look at this guy. Because I looked horrible, man. I looked horrible. And I get to the East Coast. There's my mom. She runs up to me and she's smothering motherhood all over me, right? Pre 9/11, so anybody can come into the airport. And she sees me. She runs up. She's like, Donnie, Donnie, trying to kiss me, hug me. I pushed her away from me, almost to the point of knocking her down in the airport. And I yelled at her in front of everybody. And I said the most horrible thing. I said, I hate your guts. And I meant it. I was dead to that woman. And I don't even know why, because like we were only 17 years apart, and we grew up together, and now I hated her because I was just trained by the world to hate authority. Anybody who gets in the way of what you want to do to have fun, they're the enemy. So I was like, I hate your guts. So we get into the car, and my dad says, you're going to a rehab. And you know what I did? I said to my mom, because I knew she would hear it, in the airport, I stuck a dagger in her heart. In the car, I turned that dagger and I ripped her guts out. I said, good, because it'll get me away from you. She cried, man. Oh my gosh. So I go to my first rehabilitation center in Pennsylvania, and it's still there to this day. It's called New Beginnings at Cove Forge. It's in Pennsylvania, back in the woods. I get there. It's a joke, man. I'm there for 3 months. I don't get better. I get worse. Because the sad reality is, I don't know about Ireland, but here in the United States, the studies show that, like, I think most secular rehabs have a 92% failure rate. Why? Because it's a Band-Aid on a spiritual problem. You're still treated like a monkey. They just want you to be a sober monkey, So it's like, that's all you got. And I wasn't looking for anything more. But all they did for us was we gathered every stinking night in small groups, and we would have affirmation sessions and learn not to bite our fingernails. And then we would go out into the woods and play on some kind of jungle gym and have team building experiences. And I'm like, this is so lame, dude. And you guys got master's degrees and doctorates, and this is how you're trying to help people? This is a total joke. So I ran away from it. I got caught. And then I got out. I went to my parents' house, and my mom said crazy stuff, crazy stuff. She said to me, Donnie, while you were away, I was away 3 months, your father and I have become Catholic. I'm like, oh, great. You've joined a cult. Yay, right? You're like going to drink Kool-Aid in Uganda at some point, off yourself, and go find the little green men in Planet Xeno. That's what Catholicism meant to me. You guys are idiots. So I was like, I said, Mom, you're educated. I can't believe you've been suckered by this unscientific idiot institution that oppresses people. You want me to be happy about this? And she said to me, come to church. We found the truth. And I'm like, whatever. What are you talking about? So I couldn't even stay in their house because I didn't need to go to church, man. They had turned their house into a church. They were so religious. I was like, oh my gosh. My parents they've lost their minds. So I left. I followed an old hippie band called the Grateful Dead, which I ended up getting a tattoo of on my shoulder. It's a lightning bolt with the skull. And I was doing acid, mushrooms, oh man, you name it, right? Everything under the sun. And I was just constantly fried, constantly baked. And then I got thrown into another rehab because they found me on the streets of Philadelphia. I'd smoked so much crack, freebasing crack, that I was ODing, and so they found me, and they ended up contacting my parents, and my parents put me in another rehab. This one's in Philadelphia. It's called Charter Fairmont Institute. It's also a psychological institution. So I was in a lockdown padded facility for 3 months. Did I get better? Nope, I got worse because it was the same stinking thing. Small groups, take your little Dixie cup of your pill. If that doesn't work, we'll up the milligrams with this. They don't know what the heck they're doing. So I get out of there and things got worse. I left again. I went down to Louisiana for, New Orleans for Mardi Gras, got busted, got thrown in jail. I got out. I didn't go to my court date, and I have nowhere to go. So now I'm wanted because I didn't, cooperate with the system and all that. So I go back to find my biological father in West Virginia. Remember the redneck stuff. And my mom always told me, stay away from him. He's bad news. So I thought, well, now would be a good time to get acquainted because she told me he was a renegade, an outlaw, and he's got land. And so I met him, and we didn't get along at first. And he wouldn't even let me in his house. But I discovered I had a stepmother and a half brother and a half sister I didn't even know about. Well, I lived on their property until my supplies ran out, like my marijuana. And so I go back to my mom's house in Pennsylvania, and now I can't believe it. They're not just going to church on a Sunday, which is what I saw before. Now they're going to church every day. I'm like, this is insane. And they enrolled my brother in a Catholic school. So I thought my brother was getting beat up by nuns every day, indoctrinated, like believe. That's what I thought, happened in the Catholic Church, because that's what TV says kind of happens. So I was like, this is insane. So I left again. I got in trouble again with the law. And then my things at one night, my parents had moved back down to Virginia Beach, and they invited me to be with them. And I'm like, sure. So, I went with them. And my dad was away halfway around the world on an aircraft carrier, and I'm sitting in my parents' house. They didn't even have a bedroom for me. There was a love seat, like you can't really sleep in one of those unless you're, crunched up. And because wasn't there that much, I just crashed there. And one night, man, I'm sitting in their house, and my friends are calling me, and they're like, "Dude, let's go out. What's her name? She's smoking hot, and what? He's got an 8-ball of coke. Let's meet by the pier." And I'm like, "Shut up, just shut up." I didn't want to talk to anybody, and I wasn't thinking I'm going to have a religious experience. I wanted to die. I had friends who took their lives. They're not here anymore, and I'm thinking to myself, maybe that's what I'm going to do, because I knew that my dad had it was a 38 in the floorboard, because one day it creaked. I looked down, what's that? I looked, and there was a gun with the clip next to it, not in it, but next to it, for safety, I guess. But I'm like, I knew where it was, and I'm thinking about taking my own life, because my life sucked, man. I had dropped out of school. I had no career options. I mean, I looked horrible. I was going nowhere. And this monkey did everything a monkey can do. So I'm like, this is horrible. So I'm sitting there. The phone stops ringing. My buddies are probably wasted on the beach by now. And I panicked in the silence. It was so quiet. I went out to the hallway to pick up like a National Geographic, a yellow book, to look at pictures of, Vikings or something. So I looked, and there's no yellow book. And except for one, but it's not in the National Geographic. I look at the binding, and it says something weird. It says, "The Queen of Peace visits Mejujuji Gorgi, right? I'm like, what the heck is that, man? So I pull it out, and there's some babushka looking lady on the front, barefoot on a rocky mountain. I'm like, get some shoes, grandma. I don't know what is going on here. This is just weird. But there's a cross. So that meant to me Christianity. So I'm like, aha. This is probably the dork manual that suckered my parents into joining this stupid organization called the Catholic Church. You know what? I'm going to find out what these people do. So I took that book into that room, and I tried to read it at first. It was talking about a war in some place I couldn't even pronounce. I was like, whatever. So I skipped ahead, and all of a sudden there's these 6 kids. Their names were weird. One of the girls' names, I thought her name was Marijuana, because that's what it looked like. Okay, that girl's name is Marijuana, So I was like, can't be too bad. So I kept reading, and all of a sudden these kids are like this, with a pile of necklaces on a table, looking up into the air like they had just toked up a fat one. They were like, oh, hey, they looked stoned. So I was like, what? And then the picture below it, one of them, it said, "The Blessed Virgin Mary is now appearing to the children." I'm like, the Blessed what? What's a Blessed Virgin Mary? I have no idea what this is. So I started to read from the beginning again, and they're trying to tell roses. And I'm like, what? Now I'm a dude, man, right? I'm a guy, man. So God knew what to do. So he baited me with beauty. Basically, put it in front of my face, and I couldn't see it, but the kids say they could. And they said she was so beautiful that they fell to their knees and they cried. And I'm like, man, I've been looking for a woman like that. I'm like, what kind of gypsy queen is this? Where's she come from? And where's she at? And I'm like, these kids must be smoking some good stuff, So I keep reading this thing, and I'm all into it. They're talking about this woman, and I'm like, what? And then I'll leave it up to the church to decide, but she starts talking to these kids, and I'm like, wait, what? And she starts talking about Jesus. And I'm about to close that book. I'm like, that's where we draw the line. I don't do this whole Jesus thing. Jesus is real to me as the Easter bunny, or that fat dude who comes down the chimney once a year with gifts and eats your cookies and drinks your milk. I don't believe in this stuff, okay? So she kept talking, and I'm like, but I couldn't put it down because that woman was so drew me in. So I'm like, all right, fine. All right, let's just say that dude is real. Who are you? She starts saying she's the mother of Jesus. And I'm like, I've never heard of this. Myths don't have mothers. Scooby-Doo ain't got a mom. Popeye in a cartoon, he ain't got a mom. Talking about mother of Jesus. I've never heard this. Not once during my childhood when I was flipping through cartoons and whatever, when I would stop on the preacher man, because sometimes I would, and never once did I hear the preacher man talking about the mother of Jesus. Never did I hear this. So this was a revelation to me. I'm like, okay. So I start reading this, and I read that whole book, man. I read that whole book in one night, and I didn't understand a lot of it because it was super Catholic, but I knew that what that woman was saying was true, and it was meant for me, and it blew me away. I didn't go to sleep. My mom gets up in the morning. It's like 5 o'clock in the morning. She's upstairs. I'm downstairs. She's coming down the steps. Here I am, long hair, standing in the hallway, blocking the steps. And I said to her, Mom, I got up, but I couldn't even say it. For me to ask for a churchy need, a spiritual need, was like the ultimate death. So she's like half asleep. She's like, what are you trying to tell me? And I said, Mom, I got to talk to a Catholic priest. And she said to me, and we joke about this still because my mom's still alive, you know, and she was like, yeah, right. And I'm like, Mom, I'm serious. What the heck is this? I got the book. I showed it to her. She goes, did you read that? I said, yeah. I'm like, what the heck is this? She ran to the phone, tried to get some dude. She was like, yes, Father, this is Lachita. I know it's early. Father, please see my son. But he wouldn't do it till like 9 o'clock. So she tried another one. That didn't work. So I knew where they lived. There was one of those things close by. So I said, Mom, isn't there one of those? And she knew what I was talking about, a church. She said, yes, Donnie, run. So I did. I ran to that church, long hair, dressed like a freak, you know, and I get there and, you know, I'm going to have to cut.
You're good. You're definitely good.
Okay, cool. So then I get to the church, but I don't go in because there's traffic. This can't be public. So I go over to another thing where there's a chaplain's office. So I go in there. It's like 5:15 in the morning or something, military base. And I don't know. I yell out, Catholic priest, right? And all these heads pop out, and they're scared because I look like a criminal, and they don't even want to approach me, you know. So finally, somebody comes over, and they're like, "Who are you?" I'm like, "You ain't got to worry about who I am. Give me a priest." So this other dude comes back with another dude who looked like an ordinary military guy, white uniform, got all his badges and whatnot. And I don't know what a priest looks like, but in my mind, I'm thinking like Moses. You know, I want Moses. This what these religious people got to look special. But he just looks like all the other ones. So I'm like, all right, you legit? I'm like, who are you? Like, you a preacher, man? And he's like, yeah, I guess you could say that. And that didn't give me a lot of confidence. So I was like, all right, man, you do God stuff? And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, great. Help me. And he's like, don't make a scene. So we go to his little cubicle, and he was so scared. He pulled his chair like out into the hallway because in case I tried to punch him or something, because I looked like I was bad. So he said, what's up? And I said, look, man, I got to do this whole confession thing. Then this woman told me in this book, and he's like, oh, okay, great. He goes, when's the last time you went to confession? And I'm like, dude, I don't stuff. Bad, wicked. I'm so ashamed of myself. I can't even look him in the face. I'm staring at the floor. He looks up and he's like, you did what? And I'm like, yeah, dude, I did that when I was 12, bro. You about to hear some stuff, you know? So he was like, hold on again. When's the last time you went to confession? I'm like, dude, I have no idea. He goes, well, you're a Catholic, right? And I said, absolutely not. And he got mad. He was like, what? You have to be a Catholic. This is a sacrament. You should have told me. And I'm like, dude, I don't know what the deal is here. So he said, all right, look, I'm busy. You need to come back later. So I said, don't do this to me, man. You got to help me. So he said, look, I'm going to go celebrate mass. I don't know what that means. To me, he's going to go rejoice in neutrons and protons. He's going to celebrate gravity. Dig it, man. We're going to celebrate mass, man. You know, yeah. I don't know what that man is talking about. So I'm like, what? And he goes, you don't know what that is? I said, dude, I don't know what you're talking about. So he goes, look, do you know where the chapel is? I said, yeah, I saw it. So he goes, go over there and wait for traffic to stop. I go in, and the title of the chapel is Our Lady of Victory, Naval Chapel. I go in, the door slams right in the front, man. 5 people. 5 Filipino women. I'm dead meat, man. I know what these people can do. One of them took down my whole family, right? I got a whole army of these people up in here. You couldn't get me to the back fast enough. I went to that back, like, shoot. I get down there, and I'm looking. I'm down. I don't want nobody to see me. And all of a sudden, these Filipino women, they start some Wiccan incantation in my mind. Like, if you know Filipino people, wherever there's a group of Filipinos, there's always one woman who self-appoints herself to be the leader of everybody. She tells everybody else what to do. You got to do, right? It's a very matriarchal culture. Sure enough, there she was. And so she starts telling the other ones, like, do this. And then they bust out necklaces, all of them, and they start some incantation to some boat hanging from the ceiling. That's what I thought. And this is what white boy in the back heard, okay? No offense to Filipinos. This is what I heard. Like, what the heck is that, right? Complete gibberish, unintelligible craziness. And I'm like, whatever she said, the other 4 reciprocated, and they were like, Holy Mary, amen. I'm like, what the heck? And they were flying through this thing. It was like sold to the highest bidder, you know? It was crazy. So all of a sudden, after a couple minutes, the leader pulls out her necklace, turns around to me, jingle. I'm like a deer in headlights. I'm like, what? I don't even respond to this woman because I dropped out of school. I'm not educated. But the word decade means 10 years to me. That's all. It don't mean nothing else. So she tried to clarify. She goes, the second sorrowful mystery, please. The second sorrowful mystery. I'm like, man. And I'm thinking, you better get out of here. Because when that priest comes in and sees that you witches are in here, you're going down, right? Whatever you're doing up in here, because they fired up candles and it was weird to me. I'm thinking, man, we're going to see a fight. We're going to see he's going to come in here and he's going to go to town on these people. So I'm waiting for it. I'm like, ooh, I should go get him, right? And so then this thing went on forever. He comes in and he like was cool with it. He's like, morning. And I'm like, dude. I'm like, you don't even know what they were just doing, right? Up in here in a church, these people are doing some weird incantation. So then he didn't do nothing. So then he goes up and he starts doing stuff on a table. I didn't know it was an altar. And he was saying weird stuff. He was just as weird as they were in my mind, because he was saying stuff I couldn't understand. His microphone sucked. This is all I heard. And then, on beer. That's all I heard. I'm like, what is that? That's like Charlie Brown, you know? Get a battery, bro. I'm like, I can't even understand what you're saying. And so he went over to some other thing and he read from a book, and it just went forever. And then he said some stuff that I didn't really understand. And then he went over to that table again. There was a microphone at the table that worked, thank God. And he bent over. They got on their knees, which I didn't understand. He bends over and picks up this white circle. And he says, I heard the man say this. He says, take this, all of you, and eat of it. This is my body. And he holds it up. And I'm thinking to myself, get some help, brother. You a lunatic, bro. He just told us that that's his body and we got to eat it. And then he showcases it. He's like, da-na, you know. I'm like, what? The women were all into it. They're like, yeah, you know, they're totally into it. On their knees, they're just like, I'm like, this dude's crazy. And then I heard a voice. I'm not a mystic. I don't get visions or anything, but I heard something. And I heard the voice tell me, worship. And all of a sudden, I got like injected with knowledge. I knew what that man had in his hands was God. I didn't understand terminology. Blessed Sacrament, Eucharist, Holy Communion, clueless. But I knew that man had God. Then he picked up a really sweet-looking medieval goblet, right? I didn't know it was a chalice. And he says, take this, all of you, and drink from it. This is my blood. And he holds it up. And again, I'm like, what? And all of a sudden, I heard the voice again, worship. And there was nobody else in that church but him, the 5 women, and me. It said worship. And all of a sudden, I got injected with knowledge. I knew what that man had in his hands was God. I knew it. And then I saw that dude get up. The women got up. They met in the middle. And he held up a little white circle, God. And he said to each one of them, the body of Christ. And I watched that man put God inside them. I saw this with my own eyes. I was tripping. I was like, what the voice told me was true. He didn't say to each one of those women, my body, my body, my body. He said the body of Christ. What I heard was true. And then he got the cup and he said the blood of Christ. Same thing. Oh my gosh. He said some other stuff and then he went away. They stayed for a few minutes and they left. And there I was alone with God in some kind of gold box that he put God in. He seemed to have God left over or something. And he put God in the gold box. And I was like, what? And I couldn't even stay in there because I knew I didn't belong in there. So I walked out in the back. I hit the wall. I turned around. There was a curtain and another sign said confessional. I didn't hear a voice, but what happened? Boom, knowledge. I knew what that was. I knew that that's like a hospital where you go in and you get healed from whatever's the problem is. Because I go to the hospitals a lot. I get kidney stones like every 2 to 3 years. I've broken bones all around the world surfing. It's crazy. I know hospitals very well. So I knew what this was. I went over to his office and I said, dude, I'm tripping, bro. Did you hear that voice? And he was like, what are you talking about? And I said, you did not hear that? And he goes, no. And I'm like, oh my gosh. I said, dude, I got to be honest with you. I thought you were a freak and those women were a freak when you said what you said. But I heard a voice that told me to worship and you made God, bro. You tell me that that was God that you had. And he said, yes, that's the Eucharist. I'm like, huh? He's like, that's Jesus. And I'm like, I knew it, dude. I knew it. And the cup, you had God. He's like, yes, that's the blood. I'm like, oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. I said, this dude, I'm tripping. I'm losing my mind, bro. You got to help me. He didn't know what to do. He gave me a crucifix from his wall, a picture of his grandpa. I don't know who it was. And some white pudgy dude looked like he ate one too many cookies with a little white hat. I don't know who he was. And then he gave me a picture of Jesus, a painting of Jesus, right? So I take these 3 things back to my parents' house. I hang them up in the room where I sometimes am. And I didn't know what to do. So I'm like, he told me to come back tomorrow. So I pull out the dresser drawer and I try to imitate those kids in the book. I put my hands like this And I'm like, peekaboo, where are you? How do you do this whole thing? Rubber dub dub. I don't know. I don't get it. So I'm trying, and I focused on the painting of Jesus, Sacred Heart image, but I didn't know that. And I'm thinking, all right, you're real. I think I believe in you, man. And not the image. I'm not stupid. You're not like a painting, but I get it. You're like, you exist, man. And why don't you want to kill me? You know how filthy, sick, perverted I am? And you're looking at me with the heart like this, like you love me or something. Your heart's on fire in your eyes in that image. I lost it. I started crying like a lunatic. You can't cry like this. I was like a fountain of fluid coming out of my face, man. I was crying so bad I could hardly breathe. And this lasted all day. My mom testifies to this. So the sun went down. The sun went down. I was on my knees all day crying in front of that image. Oh my gosh. I call it divine detox. God was healing my soul. So I get up, I try to go to sleep in that love seat, and then all of a sudden this happened, and we'll end with this. All of a sudden, guess who came into the room? Satan. So I didn't believe in the devil. The devil to me was like Halloween. It was good. It was fun. We watch movies about this. I mean, most of our programs are about this kind of stuff, So I didn't buy into this. And I wasn't a Satanist, bro. I never, slashed a chicken's throat around a pentagram and, that junk was crazy, But they don't mean that you have to believe in him for him to be real. So I listened to a ton of bad music. I played with the Ouija boards, all the drugs, the acid, the LSD that I was doing, man. I opened up myself to all kinds of stuff. So the devil came back to claim what he thought was his own. And I was terrified because this thing started to manifest himself in my room, started to take physical form. And let me tell you something. I have never been so terrified in my life. I was so terrified, I couldn't even move. I was paralyzed with fear. And what could I do? So I did the only thing I could. From my soul, I gathered up a cry and I screamed out to heaven. I said, Mary! I cried out to Mary because it was the Blessed Virgin Mary who brought me to Jesus. And all this happened in one day, man. So when I did that, the devil was annihilated. I mean, obliterated, totally gone from the room. And the most incredible peace came over me. And I went to sleep like a baby, man. I got up the next morning. I went to the priest, and my mom witnessed this whole thing. She gives testimony to this whole thing. I went to the priest. I told him what happened. I tripped that dude out. And I said, I want to be a Catholic. And you know what he said? No. I was like, what? Shouldn't you be happy? Like, saved your soul today. Check, right? But he said, not like that. It's not like you sign a piece of paper and you become a Catholic. You have to go to classes. And I'm like, how many? And he's like, well, it usually takes like 6 to 9 months. So the archdiocese, the military is a little different because we don't have a bishop who's on site. So I'm like, 6 to 9 months? Dude, you got to be kidding me. So he said, that's the deal. They meet on Tuesdays. I'm like, fine. So I said, sign me up. And everything changed. I got a haircut. I lost all my power. I lost my coolness. I was no longer a chick magnet. I became a dork. Right? Nobody wanted to hang out with me. All my friends left me. The cords that I couldn't cut, God came in and said, I'll cut them for you. Enough, enough, enough. Everything changed. I got a job. Imagine that. I got a job, and everything changed, man. I started taking my lunch break to go to mass. I wasn't receiving Holy Communion because I wasn't a Catholic, but it was incredible. I was in love. I would be at church in the morning before the Filipinos, man. Right? That is behavior for a white boy, So in the evening when they would shut the doors, I would look through the window to the tabernacle and I would say to Jesus, I'll see you tomorrow. I'll be back tomorrow. I was crazy in love, man. I was so in love, and everything changed. Everything changed. And then, as I'm going through the classes weren't great. I actually had to drop out of them because they were like in first gear and I was like in fifth. They're talking about, yeah, let's get together and, say a little prayer and talk about the environment. And I'm like, what? I'm like, dude, I've read about this dude named St. Louis de Montfort. Y'all heard of him? And they're like, I think somebody read that. I'm like, good grief. And I'm like, I realized who the grandpa on the wall was. It was St. John Paul II. And I was like, this dude rocks. I'm like, have you guys read some of his stuff? This stuff is like unbelievable. And they're like, yeah, well, we don't really like him. And I'm like, what? I'm like, he's the vicar of Christ. He's the Pope. I'm like, this is insane. And so we rubbed. So I couldn't stay in the class. So the priest had to give me personal instructions because I was like radical. I was like radical. And so it worked out great. So I met with him. I became a Catholic. And then I discerned my vocation to be a priest of all things. And now I've been a priest for 17 years. I had to study for 10 years to be a priest because I didn't have any education. So I had to get everything. And why am I telling you this? Because I'm special? Nope, not at all. I'm no better than anybody else. God just chose to give me so much mercy for a reason that I don't know, to be a witness to that mercy. And now, it's my joy and my delight to tell people these truths because people don't know it today. People we've lost it today. I mean, it's even crazier than when I grew up. Today, we got boys trying to act like they're girls and go into a girl's bathroom. I mean, back in my day, we called that you're a pervert, But today, people think this junk is normal. We got problems, guys. We got major problems because we've been so warped in our education system and the whole way that we've been brought up that now everybody thinks that you can just basically do anything you want at any time. We're so twisted in our understanding. And, I'm not judging anybody. We leave that up to God. But we have got to get back to the basics. We've got to get back. And we've got to know that no matter what we've done, no matter what ideology we followed, that God is a merciful Father. God is a good Father. And he wants to shower us with all these graces. But we've got to humble ourselves. We've got to acknowledge that there is right and wrong. There is light and darkness. There is truth and falsehood. And, we can dance around this issue all we want. But this is what it took for me. I had to get on my knees and cry out and acknowledge that I was broke, wounded, and in need of God. And when I did that, I didn't have to be poetic about it. God came in like a fire hydrant of love and mercy. But we've got to be humble. We've got to surrender. Now, I went through my divine romance, like a honeymoon. It don't last very long. Now, I have to commit every day to it. It's not easy. Trust me. I don't wake up every morning and go, yay, morning prayer. This is great. There's times I want to chuck that breviary into the ocean, but I've got to be faithful. I got to be committed. Love perseveres. It's willing to sacrifice. And that's what I want to let all of you who are watching this know. God loves you no matter what you've done. Be humble. Come back. Fall in love with him. He's so good. He's panting for your heart, all of it. And persevere, because the world's not going to want you to persevere. The world's going to tell you, what are you crazy? How could you possibly in this time right now become a Catholic and like a devout Catholic of all things? My friends, this is where it's at. This is where it's at. And I tell you, I'm free now. I mean, I feel it. I make my own mistakes. I go to confession like everybody else. But I know the truth now, and it set me free. And I'm going to be praying for you guys in your particular situation, no matter where you are watching this. Because what I've told you, my friends, right now, outside of my own particular experience, is the truth. Christianity, specifically Catholicism, is the truth. No matter how many stinkers are in the church, and there's a ton of them, no matter how much scandal has been caused, and there's been a ton, Catholicism is the truth, my friends. Surrender to it, and you will be free. God bless you, my friends.